Welcome to Talk Art. I'm Holly Van Hart, and I'll be your host as we delve into the fascinating world of Silicon Valley's finest artists. Talk Art is sponsored by Silicon Valley Open Studios. Every year, for the first 3 weekends of May, hundreds of local artists open up our studios to the public. For more information, please visit svos.org. Our guest today is Pantea Karimi. Pantea is a printmaker, painter, and art instructor. Pantea has lived and worked in Iran, the UK, and the US, and currently resides in San Jose, California. Intriguingly, Pantea's art is inspired by medieval and early modern scientific manuscripts. Welcome, Pantea.
Thank you.
Please tell us about yourself.
Well, I started my training in painting and classical music when I was 14, which led to my decision to pursue art professionally. I earned 2 Masters of Fine Arts and Graphic Design degrees, one from Tehran Art University in graphic design, and one in painting and printmaking from San Jose State University. I also studied, when I was in England, I studied printmaking and glassworks at Hastings College of Arts and Technology.
Wow. And tell me, what inspires you to create your art, and specifically art that is based on these early modern and medieval scientific manuscripts?
My graphic design background has influenced my fine art practice and aesthetic. As a graphic designer, I've been always interested in the layout of book and print media. I'm intrigued by the ways image and text interact and they convey meaning. So following this interest, my current body of work explores the history of archaic technologies and how older scientific concepts were communicated through both image and text. I explored these concepts within the pages of medieval and early modern scientific manuscripts, particularly Persian, Arab, and European. And I'm also interested in exploring the exchange of knowledge, the long-term exchange of knowledge between these cultures.
So your work covers the manuscripts of some Muslim scientists. Tell us some more about that.
Yeah, I particularly engage with the work of Muslim scientists during the medieval time because they had a tremendous impact on preserving knowledge and enhancing it for a global audience. They translated the Greek scientific texts into Arabic, and that's how they preserved that knowledge. But generally speaking, researching these scientific manuscripts has been a great experience for me because they not only provide me with the chance to explore what I love, the relationship between image and text, but also it expands my appreciation of science and its impact on society and culture. These scientific manuscripts are very beautiful. They are filled with hand-drawn images and calligraphic texts, and they're very engaging and dynamic in terms of design.
Great, I can't wait to see them. You're going to show us a few.
Sure. So this is a page from the Herbal of Algefiji Manuscript. Algefiji was an Andalusian scientist, botanist, from Andalusia, 12th century. And you can see the image of a plant with the writings around it on this page. These are the images of 4 vulvels. Vulvels were gadgets that were installed inside scientific manuscripts, and scientists used them to calculate celestial problems or other subjects, and they were made out of paper, and they made the scientific manuscripts dynamic and engaging for the scientists to use.
And Pantea, how did you get the idea to do this kind of artwork?
Well, I studied science in high school in Iran. I was a visual learner, and at that time, rote learning was the focus, and most scientific concepts were not explained through hands-on manners. So as a result of that high school experience, and since the beginning of this project, I've been after creating a new visual language and interpreting all these scientific texts and diagrams into images. It's just an interesting process for me to go through those texts and diagrams and see them as image rather than what they are.
And how do you go about starting your work?
I start my work by converting these diagrams and texts into black silhouettes, which in other words, I call them images. Acting as a new visual language, these black silhouettes basically present the medieval imagery through simplicity and absence of didactic textual information, while they're offering me basically an opportunity to create installations out of them or to print them. So I make these black silhouettes, and then I just use them and compose them in different compositions, either by printing them on paper or other substrates, or showcase them in installations.
And does your use of black have a specific meaning?
Yeah, most of my work is done black and white. Black is very powerful to me. And to me, it stands for the act of inscribing, ink, and also redaction. It also symbolizes immediacy and some kind of mystery for me.
Oh, very interesting. So now we get to see some images of your work, Pantea.
Sure. So this is a section of my work that is called Nexus. On the top row, you see the pages of manuscripts done by different scientists from medieval time and early modern period. And then on the bottom row, you see how I converted those texts and diagrams into black silhouettes. This is called Nexus, and it features scientists who were either influenced or inspired by each other's scholarly work or research.
I have a question, Pantea. Are you reading the texts in the languages and using that as part of the art?
I sometimes I'm able to read some of them, but not always. If they're written in Arabic, my Arabic is very limited, so that makes it difficult for me to understand everything. Therefore, I have to rely on my findings that are translated in English, or at least in Persian. Then I can read it better.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is an installation of those black silhouettes. This piece is called Lore, and it showcases all those black silhouettes that I made out of the scientific manuscript pages. And then I created this installation using black plexiglass, and they were screwed to the wall. So I created this installation as a horizontal composition.
And Pantea, is this something that you read from left to right?
Yes, maybe because my first language is Persian, I read easier from left to right. And when I was composing this installation, I started from left to right. That could be the reason I did that. This is a shot from both Nexus and Lore together. This is a view from my solo show back in March 2016. And I installed the two pieces together. These are the images of hybrid vulvels, the two images of 36 that I made. On the bottom part, you see an original image of a vulvel and my rendition of that sample. I made these first out of paper, and then I stretched them on wood pieces, and then they can hang as objects on the wall.
Great. So now we get to see a demonstration of your work, and maybe you can start by telling us about your tools and materials.
I use a screen printing, watercolor, graphite, and ink on paper as well as on vellum, plexiglass, or wood to create a dynamic and novel interpretation of these scientific, concepts that I find in manuscripts. So the demo I have for you is a screen printing demo. I have a stencil of an original illustration of Ptolemy Geocentrism, and this illustration was done in 16th century by a Portuguese cartographer. And this is a screen printing stencil, and this is a screen printing frame. Screen printing is a printmaking technique that uses a screen that is either made out of wood or it is made out of aluminum, and a fabric that is called mesh is stretched tightly around this frame. Creating your stencil, you need to use emulsion, which comes in buckets like this, and it is sensitive to natural light, so it has to be done inside a dark room. And then you need a scoop coater. You pour your emulsion in the dark room inside this scoop coater, and then coat your screen with this emulsion, and you let it dry. It has to dry thoroughly. In the meantime, you will focus on creating your images, and you make transparencies out of them, and they have to be black. And these transparencies, you can expose more than two. They will be exposed to the screen that has emulsion on using a UV exposure unit. And
still in a dark room?
Yeah, it can be outside the dark room, but since it is sensitive to the natural light, you need to just cover all the windows. Mm. And then when your exposure is done, you need to wash your screen, and those black areas will wash off, and they will be basically bare, and that means that the ink goes through that section, and therefore you can print your artwork. So I can do obviously the emulsion section and coating it here, but this screen is already done, and I have taped the corners to make sure there is no opening except the middle, and then I can just have the demo for you to see how this process works. So in order to create a print using this screen, you need to have a table that has hinge clamps, and you just put the screen under, and you tighten your clamps, and you make sure that the screen goes up and down comfortably and easy. You need to have a method of registration, because if you want to print more than one artwork, and you have a specific area on the paper that this print should show up on, therefore you need to register your paper. One of the ways that you can do that is this transparency flip registration, that you tape a transparency like a mylar, and then it would just go on the table and off the table as I showed it. So, and then you need ink. This is a very good brand. I use a Speedball a lot, but there are other brands are also available. And you will just put the ink outside your open area of your stencil. You need probably around an inch. And you have to use your judgment how much ink you need to pull down and go back if you need to print more than, you know, one paper. And then this is a squeegee. I should show this. Squeegee comes in various sizes, and it has to fit right inside your screen. So you have to calculate what size of screen you need and what size of squeegee would be good, and therefore your stencil, I mean the transparency would fit these, you know, sizes. And then you put the ink behind your stencil. And I prefer a 45 to 65 degree angle for the squeegee to hold. And then you pull down, not too fast, not too slow. So right now I printed on top of my Mylar because I want to register my paper. So I have BFK Reeves paper, which is one of the best papers for screen printing, but there are other papers also available. So this flip down, you put your paper there, you make sure your paper doesn't move. You can tape the paper on the table. Then you flip your transparency back on the paper and register your image on it. You let this go. We make sure that we send all the ink up. As I am doing this, I just realized I need to add more ink. You don't want to run out of ink while you are printing.
And you needed to add more ink because the other ink dried, or because it was already put on the...
It wasn't enough
Okay.
for me to pull down the print,
Okay.
I mean the ink. So this is the image that I just printed.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And you just need to have a rack and leave your prints to dry. It could take up to a few hours, you know, length of time for them to dry. And now you printed your first one, you can just, you have your registration, you can continue printing the same image.
So I'm not sure the use of the registration. Can you describe that to us a bit?
Sure. Because if you want to do editions, screen printing usually come with editions, like you print more than one prints. Therefore, artists prefer that their paper to be the same size every time, and the image to fall right in the same spot. So you cut your paper the same, and you just make sure that the print always falls in the same spot. Therefore, this registration helps you to do that process easier.
Okay, great.
And I'm just going to clean up my screen. You always just return the ink into the bucket before washing your screen. And this was only one color print. You can just prepare your stencil so it accommodates more than one color and as many as you want.
Now you're usually using black, is that right?
Well, for this project, yeah. Most of my works are black and white, so I have a I have a few black ink buckets in my in my studio. So I'm just going to clean up a little bit. You can clean on the side like this. Or you can just take your screen to the sink. The whole idea is that you don't want the ink to dry on your stencil.
And then you can use the stencil again.
Yeah, you usually use your stencil more than once.
Can you use it almost infinite times, or does it wear out at some point?
It could wear out at some point. It depends on how you take care of your stencil and how well it was made in the beginning. But usually it could just give you 100 prints before it wears out. You just need to This is basically good for now.
That's your process. That's great.
Yeah.
And then we get to see some more of your work through these images.
Yes. So this is a painting I did using the same image that I just showed earlier.
Yeah.
And so the image is a screen print, and the surrounding is watercolor, ink, and graphite. And I created a painting out of it. It is called The Return of Geocentrism. This is another painting I did in the botanical series that I have. And again, it uses ink, watercolor, and screen printing layers that I go back and forth and work them together.
So these inks are waterproof?
These inks are waterproof, yes.
And can you paint on them with other media as well? Or do you always use watercolor?
You can't work on the area that is screen printed. It has a very opaque, flat surface. Sometimes you can work with color pencil on them, but other than that, it is a very, opaque section. So I usually work around it rather than on top of it.
Well, they're beautiful.
Thank you.
All right, and Pantea, do you have some exhibitions coming up of your work? Where can we see more of it?
Sure. The two exhibitions that are planned as of now are one, actually I'm planning to participate in Open Studios in spring 2017. I think it's a great venue to reach out a broader audience. I'm also the recipient of Kala Artist Residency Award.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And that starts in January. And there will be an exhibition of all the awardees' work in mid-July 2017.
So are you actually going to be a resident at the Kala?
At the Kala Institute,
Oh,
yes.
great. For how long?
It is between 1 to 6 months.
Oh.
Yeah, it could be a long residency if I choose to.
Yeah.
So when I start my work, then I can decide how much time I need, and that would determine the length of my residency.
Oh, and do you already know your objectives for this residency?
Yes, I have decided to work on the medieval botany and basically explore ways how I can use the screen printing or other printmaking media to represent the images. I'm also planning to use the facility at Kala. They have different facilities in digital media, in printmaking, and other mediums. So that would be a great thing to do, just to mix different mediums together.
To try out some of the
To try
digital
out.
stuff
Yeah,
too?
digital as well as the screen printing. I think this is one of the thoughts I have as of now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great. And let's see, tell us more about the botanical piece of this. So that's a newer emphasis of yours?
Yes, it is. The medieval botanical manuscripts are very important because they feature the medicinal plants. And they also have a beautiful rendition of each plant in these. As I mentioned earlier, I would like to focus on Algefiji, the herbal of Algefiji botanical manuscript, which is from the 12th century. It's one of the most appreciated work of medieval botanists. So right now I am just trying to get the English translation of the Arabic text as much as possible to understand the properties of these medicinal plants. So, and I'm just kind of trying to basically design my whole residency in terms of how I want to use those images, how I want to just appropriate some or not.
Interesting. And do the, just briefly, tell us, do the plants still exist? And do you know how those images translate to plants in
Yes,
the modern?
some of them still exist, like cucumber, like
cool.
eggplant, and many others. They do, and those that I could find the translation are actually those that we still have them, and we either use them in medicine or we eat them, like cucumber.
Wow. Well, this was really fascinating, Pantea, so thank you
you
so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.